Advocacy Day Policy Briefing Part 2. Today's format will be a little different than the first one. We are going to do an overview of ABMA's priorities for Advocacy Day. We have 4 legislative priorities that we're going to be talking about. How the meeting is going to run is I'm going to give a little introduction. And then I'm going to hand it off to Rita, who's going to be doing most of the talking on the policy briefing. We're hoping that it'll run much like the last one. This is going to be not a lot of us talking at you like it's a presentation, and more of an overview, and then we're hoping for discussion and questions to follow. So a little bit about Advocacy Day and why it matters. I do this every time, and eventually I'm going to run out of talking points, but I haven't yet. So Advocacy Day is important, and going to DC to talk to your legislators, because one, you get to talk about things that impact your businesses and make that connection with legislators where they wouldn't have that otherwise. And two, which I think is almost just as important, and it drives the other one, it's a chance to build a relationship and tell them about what our industry is and what we do. I was on a call with the Rhode Island guys last week, and we weren't talking about it. I hadn't brought this up. Matt brought it up on his own out of nowhere, and he was just talking about the industry, and he said, the LBM industry is the biggest industry that no one's ever heard of. And that was his take on it before he joined the industry. And I have to say, my experience, I agree. When I first interviewed for the position, Rita was telling me about how many members we have and how many locations there are. And I got to tell you, I had never seen anything to my memory besides Lowe's and Home Depot, the big box guys. And after that interview, and since then driving around, I see lumber yards and building material dealers everywhere, all the time. They are all over the place. And I have to say, Matt's words have been ringing in my head ever since. So I would urge you, when you go to Advocacy Day, the policy is important in advocating for what our industry needs, but it's just as important for them to know who we are, right? Start at the beginning. What your business is, what you sell, how many people you employ, where you're located, simple things like that. When I was in the New York State Capitol, the New York guys came every year. I met with them I can remember meeting Dana Schnipper as many as 6 years ago. And I understood his issues really well, right? But I never really understood what you guys did. And so I would urge you, as almost as equally important as the issues, is to educate legislators on who we are. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Rita for policy.
Thanks, Francis. And hey, everybody, looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. My gosh, it's hard to believe it's right around the corner. But yeah, I'm just going to walk through our 4 primary issues. Feel free to interrupt, but let's start with tax. As you all know, we've been working this issue pretty aggressively for the last several months. We had a big victory when the House passed the tax package by an overwhelming vote. And we're really encouraged when they sent it to the Senate, and we were hoping for expeditious action in the Senate. Recall, this is the bill that restores full expensing, 100% bonus depreciation. That began to take a haircut by 20% at the beginning of 2023 and got another 20% haircut at the beginning of 2024. So this bill would restore retroactively to 100%. And then extend that credit through the end of next year, 2025. It also reauthorizes retroactively the research and development tax credit, which allows you to write off R&D costs in the same year in which they were incurred. That expired flat out in 2022. So it would extend retroactively from 2022 to 2025, the R&D tax credit. And then the Section 179 deduction limits are also increased, which is a good thing. And then they had some interest deductibility provisions in there that are business friendly as well. So really like the bill. Unfortunately, it's run into Republican opposition in the Senate, primarily led by Senator Mike Crapo, who is the ranking member on the Senate Finance Committee. That's the tax writing committee in the upper chamber. And the reasons are, I think, 1 part substantive and 3 parts political. I think on the substantive, piece of it. He doesn't like the so-called look-back provision in the child tax credit part of the package that allows, if you have a down year, if you and your family have a down year, you can use a previous year to calculate the credit. They don't like that. Republicans are not crazy about that provision. There's also concerns about how the bill is paid for. It shuts down the employee retention tax credit, and there's been a lot of fraud around that. And there's just some procedural issues that the Republicans have. And unfortunately, the opposition seems to be hardening. You've got a race for the Republican leader in the Senate. As you know, Mitch McConnell is stepping down as leader in November after the election. And so John Thune and John Cornyn are aggressively working with their colleagues to assume that position, and they don't want to run afoul of Senator Crapo. You've also got, it's an election year. Republicans really don't want to give President Biden a win on this. So a lot of things are just kind of adding up. The other part of the narrative is you've got this tax cliff again at the end of 2025. A lot of provisions in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expire, including, for those of you who are S corporations, our Section 199 deduction, which is that 20% deduction for S corps and pass-throughs. That expires at the end of 2025. So we're going to be confronting a tax cliff at the end of next year. And so Republicans are like, well, why don't we just wait till then and address it all then? So not a great setup. We continue to really work the issue hard. Senator Leader Schumer came out with a Dear Colleague letter last week saying that this is going to be a top priority for Senate Democrats over the next several weeks. But it's kind of getting late early. We need to get this done. Tax day was Monday. We need to get this done soon. So hopefully we'll have some better news for you when you get here to DC. But I think we just continue to work the House and Senate on this, and thank the House members that voted for it, and really work your Senate meetings to encourage expeditious action on this package. So let me stop there real quick. I threw a lot at you, but happy to answer any questions before we move on.
So I'm in favor of all of it, and I think it's important. The one thing that's confusing to me, and that's maybe with some discussion will allow me to present the information better and advocate better when I'm in front of the senators. It says it's a tax relief for American families and workers, but within the key provisions, it never mentions anything about families and workers. It's all for businesses.
That's the child tax credit proportion of it. It beefs up the child tax credit. That's what got Democrats on board. That was always part of the deal. Like, okay, Republicans are like, we need these business incentives, and Democrats are like, whoa, we got to do something with the CTC, and then we'll play ball. So that's where
that's important, because I thought last year Bernie Sanders' office was going to kick me out when I brought this up. So maybe I'll have a better chance this time in explaining the importance of it.
Well, it's really an interesting dynamic too. So the relatively new chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee is trying to change the narrative around the Republican Party to one of more based on workers and families. And so he was a strong proponent of the child tax credit, and getting away from we only support corporate America to, wait a minute, these rural communities are the social stuff is important. So
yeah, well, the rural communities rely on small business, so anything we can do to keep small business in business is only going to help those rural communities. So I at least in my mind now have something to tie it to, so that maybe I'll get further. Thank you.
I guess I have a similar question. I'm trying to understand from a rubber hits the road sort of perspective, how I this really to really be able to speak strongly about it, I need to understand how it really affects their constituencies beyond the business owners. While it's super important, what is it really going to mean for the local communities for them to get behind this and get it done? I mean, it's got to be something beyond just the P&L. This ultimately.
Well, yeah, I don't know that I would get really deep into the child tax credit. I would just, if you do take advantage, particularly on the full expensing, the 100% bonus depreciation piece, I would just talk about what that means to your business. I mean, you know, that's a huge, from what I understand, that is a really big deal. And
I guess
you
that's
know,
what I'm asking, as I'm not an owner, so I
got
don't,
it.
you know, beyond. I know I'll support my owner. She,
Yeah.
that's my livelihood to make sure she's in a good position.
Yep.
But beyond that, you know, what does it really do?
So on the bonus depreciation piece, again, it's gotten 2 haircuts. It's supposed to fully phase out, I think, in 2027. And at that point, you'd be basically amortizing all of the costs of your investments in machinery and equipment over a 5-year period, instead of the way the provision was crafted as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the way we've enjoyed it until 2023. You can fully write off the cost of those purchases in the year in which those investments were made. It's really
and Eric, one thing that we brought up last year when we were doing this in person prior to the meetings, you know, we're being, I wouldn't say forced, but we're being strongly encouraged to invest in new equipment that is, you know, leaves behind a smaller carbon footprint. And this, to me, is a vehicle that allows businesses to do that. Get some of those older pieces of equipment off the road or out of your yard, invest in new, more fuel efficient or environmentally friendly equipment. And that depreciation is, I know for RK Miles, is something we fully take advantage of.
Okay, I'm getting a perspective that I can work on in my head. Reinvestment.
Are there any other members on that could speak directly to how that affects the business?
Yeah, I can do that.
Perspective.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Claudia Holman, I am the CFO of Bethel Mills. So you got a couple of things, right? You had a company and they want to invest in new equipment. If they don't have great credit right now, financing rates are really, really, really high, right? So you're not going to want to do that. New equipment means new business, means more employees, always. Cash flow is always a question. So depreciation is something where we say, hey, you know, I'm gonna put $250,000 into this new truck. That new truck requires drivers, and in addition, the company that you bought it from is actually making some money as well, right? So we're keeping people employed. It is not as much, and you know, think of it in your own sense, right? If you want to go out and buy a new car, that's a lot of money for you. If there was, especially an electric car, as Jeremy wisely states, if there's some incentive for you to do that, you're going to want to take advantage of it. It's just a matter of what's coming out of your pocket on a monthly basis, how much can you spend, and what's it going to do for you. It's a practical matter. It's been in place for a while, and it really has helped small businesses grow, compete, stay strong. Back in 2008, 2009, 2010, we were, as a lumber industry, we were in a depression, not a recession. We duct taped our trucks looked really nice on the outside because we had them nice and painted and clean, but we used a lot of spit and duct tape to keep them running. And this is the kind of thing that helped us to actually purchase equipment and to stay new and to stay competitive. So there's a lot of benefits to it. And again, just think about it as yourself. When you get a mortgage, right, on a piece of property, the government allows you to write off that interest expense. That makes it a viable option for you to get a mortgage, right? So
Yep.
it is the government helping us to grow, to stay strong, to keep employees, and also to fund the people that are making the equipment as well.
Excellent.
She's going to give the legislative briefing when we're all in town.
No, I've been to Bernie Sanders' office when we were talking about the estate tax.
Oh yeah.
They looked at me cross-eyed. You talk about being like annoyed, Jeremy. So you and I will both go out having them be annoyed at us.
He's tough.
There's a few other good provisions in that bill, like the deduction for domestic research and experimental expenditures. I'm not sure if that affects our guys as much. Does anyone want to speak to that? For R&D?
I think, the New Hampshire company, it's escaping me. Oh shoot. One of our legislative committee members it was important to them, the R&D tax credit.
Yeah, I was just thinking of Sarah, right? Yeah.
Sarah, I'm sorry. It's been a long
I
week.
think for sorry, I got a train going right past my office. I think for our vendors, this is probably more important because they're always trying to improve their products. So research and development allows them to do that.
So it all goes hand in hand, though. It's right kind of thing. Like Claudia was saying, it's not only just for us, but it also supports all the things connected to us.
Right. Well, I apologize if I get off the rail. Just slap me back in line because I'm curious. Does anybody know if that bonus depreciation extends to rental equipment? Or is that different than capital expense for like trucks in the yard?
You got to buy it.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I mean, like a rental fleet, like something we buy to rent to our customers. But never mind. I'll dig into that. Sorry.
You can ping
That's a
me
good question.
offline.
I'll take a note. We'll get back to you. Or Claudia will know.
Yeah, you
Get
can
the new
just ping
chief
me
policy
offline.
briefer. Pat, you want to get into the Credit Card Competition Act?
I sure can. So another issue that we have, a lot of people are working for and against is the Credit Card Competition Act. The bills are S 1838 in the Senate, led by Majority Whip Dick Durbin out of Illinois, and Roger Marshall is his Republican counterpart in Kansas. And then the House companion is HR 3881, led by Lance Gooden. He's a Republican out of Texas. And essentially, the bill would require the big banks, so the credit card issuing banks, those with 100 billion or more in assets, to enable at least 2 credit card networks to process the transactions associated with their card. So basically, this is just to get away from or seek relief from the current Visa MasterCard duopoly. And we've heard a lot from our members that credit card transaction fees are increasing, and this is a big issue. And so, unfortunately, it's pitted some pretty potent political forces against each other. The big banks don't like it at all, and of course, we're supportive of it. The Retail Industry Leaders Association, a big retail group, National Federation of Independent Businesses, are also in support. So you've got some pretty, again, potent interests on both sides of this issue. The late last year, leadership had committed to Senator Durbin that they would get a vote on an amendment. They were basically going to craft this bill into amendment form, and it would be considered on the Senate floor as part of a larger package. That hasn't happened yet. So, I think our ask here is just, either co-sponsor the Credit Card Competition Act, whether it be, in the House or the Senate, and particularly on the Senate side, if the amendment comes up, to vote in support of it. I think that's a pretty straightforward one. It's interesting. I mean, just a question to the group: Are you all seeing these fees as a major issue?
This one, I apologize again. I like to talk a lot, so just give me a kick. But this one, I understand a problem. I'm confused as to exactly how this fixes it. So maybe somebody here can help me, because the problem I have here is we can never tell what the swipe fee is going to be because every type of card is different. If it's a travel card, if it's a points card, if it's a low interest card, they all have their own rate. And we go back to the banks and say, what is our rate? And then supposedly it was confidential, but somebody sent us a menu trying to show us what the rate was. And it was like 4 pages, and they ranged all over the place based off of the type of the card. But I'm not sure how the network affects that. What portion of that is the network versus the actual bank who issued the points card that I'm paying for? Does anybody know?
I don't know the answer to that. Again, this bill, I think the theory or the concept behind this bill is you're introducing some competition into the network, and competition generally leads to lower rates.
Okay.
That's all I know.
All right.
I sat down with Claudia on actually, and we went through one of the bills with Bethel Mills and the credit card swipe fees. And I'm with Pat on this one. I don't think, I'm not the policy guy, but I don't think it addresses the transparency problem. You have two problems, right? The fees are high. Two, you don't know what they're tied to, how much they're going to be. It's just a list of charges, and it's huge. But what this will address is the other part that Claudia mentioned. A lot of the fees you can't even negotiate, right? The rate's the rate, and that's it. You're locked in, no matter whether it's high or low, and they're high. So what this is going to do is it's going to allow there to be some competition. There'll be other places you can go to get competitive rates on these fees, at least. So rather than them just saying, "Sorry, that's what it is," you'll have a chance here. So this goes more at the price of the fees rather than what they are.
I mean,
So
we're becoming a cashless society. I mean, all the amount of transactions that are happening on a credit card is tremendous compared to what it used to be 5 or 10 years ago.
So is this interchange or fees? This is fees, correct? So just let me see if because I'm sorry, I'm coming in like not, yesterday was tax day, so I'm just coming out of that. So just my understanding is Bank ABC decides that they want to send out or give out a credit card to their customers. So it's going to be the ABC MasterCard or Visa, or they can now maybe use another company. Is that correct? That's what we're trying to get to.
Right. So I guess MasterCard and Visa have their own processing system,
Right.
and this would force them to enable another processing system to process those transactions that are charged to Visa, MasterCard.
Right. Which actually could help in interchange as well. So
yep.
Yeah.
So as I understand it, it looks a lot like the debit card statute that was enacted a few years ago. It's based off of that, and this would just apply that to credit cards.
So Francis, I can send you over the informational piece that I have because I did get that. I haven't sent it to you yet. That says what interchanges, what are fees. So we can negotiate our processing fee, but we can't negotiate interchange. So interchange is when somebody shows up at your store, and that's to what, hi, Eric, I don't know you, but that's what Eric was talking about. Somebody gives you a Platinum American Express card, and they're earning like double, triple bogey points because of that. That cost is coming back to you in what they call interchange. And the credit card statements do not clearly tell you which card, which transaction is responsible. I mean, it might tell you that 3 transactions cost you $1,100 that month, but it won't tell you the detail, at least not to the best of my knowledge in any statement I've ever seen. But I will send you what those fees are and anything that can help with competition, because one would assume that that new company, that third company, would want to like get in the door with a lower rate would be good.
Right, exactly. It'll allow some market dynamics here where, one guy's going to charge a different price and the other guy's going to say, "Wait, hey, wait a minute, you're beating me," right? Whereas right now there is none of that.
Excuse me. Go ahead.
I was just saying, it seems like there needs to be some sort of policy that says if you're going to charge an additional merchant fee of 3% so that you can give the customer 3% back, that they should be telling them that we're being charged for that. Not, it's not the credit card giving them money.
Rita has her hand raised.
Does MasterCard and Visa get to choose who this other partner is?
No,
And
I don't think so. I don't think so, Rita. That's not spelled
Okay.
out in the bill. I don't think it's spelled out in the bill.
Thank you. Okay,
And Eric,
Steve?
yeah, I think you're on the same page as a lot of other members. There's 2 parts to it. It's the transparency and the fees. And yeah, I can see how it's incredibly frustrating that you don't know what it's going to be and they just list it out. And from what I could tell in Claudia's bill, they don't even tie it to anything. It just says this was the card and this was the fee, right? And, so you don't even know what they
Basically.
bought technically, right? And why that fee was, there's no transparency is what I'm saying. And yeah, I think a lot of members across the board are saying the same thing. But this one gets at more of the fees that you can't negotiate, right? That you're stuck with, and trying to get something in there where there's other options so that you can drive these rates down a bit, right? By having market dynamics involved.
It's definitely a step in the right direction.
And Steve has his hand up.
I understand transparency and the need to negotiate swipe fees, but I'm struggling. Why in a free market system that we have, we need legislation to break a duopoly? I mean, why can't another competitor just come in?
Yeah, I don't know that marketplace well enough to be able to answer that, but evidently that's not the case. It's they control it's market cap. They control the market, and they control most of the transactions. I don't have a good answer for that.
And I think we're getting a little bit past it with Steve's question here, but in the interest of conversation, they were just found to be violating antitrust laws and found guilty of that. So they are a little bit on the far end of the spectrum there,
Well,
to
okay,
the point that they're breaking some laws.
All right, that's understandable then. If they're, if they're in violation of law, okay. If they're stifling competition, but absence of that, again, I don't understand why another competitor can't come into the market. But okay, let's move on.
Well, maybe the politicians can explain that to us.
I hope so. Probably not, though.
I'll try to have a better answer for you when you guys come to town, because we're going to talk through these issues again.
I mean, because listen,
I'm writing all these down, Pat, so I'll get them to you.
I'm pretty sure on Durbin has Senator Durbin has a pretty lengthy piece around supporting his legislation. I'm pretty sure he answers that question, but we'll have a better answer for you.
I wonder if it has something to do with the platform that they're utilizing, right? So because it's information that's going out through a certain security, through certain encryption. So I wonder if it's the platform that they're using, that they're not allowing anybody else access to that. They might have that blocked off and say it's proprietary software. I don't know.
I got a lobbyist buddy that works for Visa, so I'll plug in with a question, see what he comes back with.
All right, you want to move on, Pat?
Yeah, let's move on to the supply chain piece of this. So again, pretty promising development. When was that? June or July? The House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee reported out a package of bills that we were supportive of several components of, and it was a good bipartisan vote, and it's been sitting awaiting House floor action since that time. No substantive opposition to it based on our conversations. It's just leadership has not found floor time to address pass the bill. The package includes a couple of truck related provisions that we like. One is a truck weight pilot. It would allow semi-tractor trailers equipped with a 6th axle to travel at 91,000 pounds on the federal interstate system. Right now, the limit is 80,000 pounds on 5 axles, and it's just an efficiency issue. This would be a pilot. States could opt into a pilot to allow these heavier trucks to travel on the interstate, and so instead of having 80,000 pound rigs rolling through small towns and through crosswalks in these small towns across the country, it would allow these rigs to get out a little bit heavier, but get out on the interstate and just make it a more efficient route all the way around. It's also got legislation in there that would authorize more truck parking. I guess that's a major issue for owner operators. And the other piece that we were interested in is the License Act that we lobbied on or worked in support of in our last fly-in. And that was simply codify a couple of waivers that were issued the DOL issued during the pandemic that just makes it more efficient for those that are trying to get a commercial driver's license to do so. One of the rules was you had to take the driver test in the same state where you did your training. So if you trained in New York, but you lived in Pennsylvania, you'd have to go back to New York to take the test. It made no sense at all. So there was a couple of common sense waivers that they issued, and this would make those permanent. So I think that was it. The other was there's also a bill in there that makes participation in the Safe Driver Apprenticeship Program more attractive. That was passed. The Drive Safe bill was passed back in, it was like 2022, and it would allow 18 to 21-year-old drivers to drive their rigs interstate. Right now, they're only, like, if you're a driver in New York and you're 18, 20, 21 years old, you can't leave New York State. You have to be within the state's borders. This would allow these drivers to drive across the country if the situation warranted. It just makes the idea behind the bill is it makes the choosing a career in truck driving more attractive. This is an apprenticeship program. They would have to be riding with a seasoned truck driver, and then once they performed the requisite number of hours behind the wheel, then they'd be allowed to drive interstate. So again, these are all sort of supply chain efficiency measures that we liked and supported in our last fly-in. And so the ask really is for the House to take up the measure and pass it.
Okay, on this one, I have an etiquette question, because while anything that would help, I'm going to be in favor of and ask somebody else to support. But the reality for most of us in the LBM, at least in the local level, is that the problem with all of these new legislative acts that they came out with is it's restricting CDLs, but they're really aiming at tractor trailers. Our problem is that we need straight job CDL truck drivers who can deliver locally. And now what they've essentially done is they've taken what used to cost $250 and we could do it in-house, and they've made it a $9,000 investment to get a license. Our drivers don't drive. They rarely drive interstate. They don't drive overnight. They don't drive overweight. They don't drive in bad weather, but they're being lumped in with the national carriers who drive across the country. We need some sort of flexibility to allow us to be able to hire local drivers. In every state in the country, you used to be able to, if you knew somebody with a truck, you could practice with the truck, take the test, and get your license. Not an A license, not a tractor trailer, but a straight job, CDLB.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't do that anymore. And that affects the membership more than anything else, because that's the majority of the trucks that we drive and deliver with. But I don't want to get so far off. I can get passionate about that one, but I don't want to distract from the bill. So I guess I'm asking about etiquette. Do I stay away from it?
No, I think those are great issues to raise. And, say, look, we support this package. Just know that we've got other issues as, in the LBM sector. This is how we operate, and any sort of flexibility that Congress could consider in our particular sector would be much appreciated. I think that's right in the wheelhouse.
Okay, because there's already so the electronic data logging, there's already a waiver that we don't need to use it as long as our drivers stay within 100 air miles of our home base. There's no reason why they couldn't do the same thing with a license.
I believe that companies can become certified or official trainers, but there's a program you have to go through in order to do that, and that's somewhat prohibitive for companies like ours.
It's a very prohibitive. Somebody like me. I mean, I have 5 drivers in one location. We looked into it. It was, we have to have a designated road course. We have to.
Yes.
It's very expensive.
Yep. Agreed.
Are we
I also
doing more
looked-
Yeah, Eric, I
with the
think that's great.
workforce
That kind of
development?
stuff, it's
Are we doing more this year with the workforce development bill? Because I thought that was also part of it, We
Yep.
talked a lot last year in DC about how the whole industry was aging out as far as truck drivers, and that was a huge push last year.
So that is a fourth tranche in our, should I pivot to workforce?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
go
because
for
I
it.
think the two tie together.
Yeah, for sure. So we actually have an actual bill that passed last week. Yeah, it was last week. Overwhelming vote. It was like 378 to 25, 26. That's HR 6655. And it would reauthorize the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So WIOA, think about it as sort of the basket, the big federal statute that's the basket for all of our country's workforce development programs and apprenticeship programs. It reauthorizes WIOA and fully funds all the programs. But I think just in broad strokes, it streamlines like eligibility, training, provider list requirements to focus more on outcomes, and really focuses on getting workforce programs to align with the skills and hiring demands of local employers. I haven't been able to go through the bill completely, but there's definitely themes throughout that really it's pushing control more to the local level and trying to line up local providers and local workforce needs with those of the community. So all in all, I mean, again, a bipartisan vote. The path is unclear in the Senate. I got calls into the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, which does all of the workforce policy making in the Senate, to figure out, are they crafting a different bill? Are they going to take up this bill? What the status is there. So I'll have more for you when we convene in a couple of weeks. But all in all, we've got a good bill to kind of to say, hey, thank you for your support. We look forward to the Senate moving on this bill or something similar very soon.
So you refer to that as HR 665?
6655.
6655. I think it would be important for us to have something in our packet so that I like to start a conversation by thanking someone before I ask for something. I think that sets a really comfortable tone. So in the event that I do come across someone in one of my 3 appointments, I'd like to ask if they supported that. And if they did, I'd like to actually thank them and shake their hand for doing that. And then if they didn't support it, I'd like to ask them why. So
we'll definitely have something in there.
Okay, thank you. You get bees with honey, not vinegar.
And I think you'll have that opportunity as well on the tax credit reauthorization bill. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, because that one passed the House, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think we want to thank as much as we want to ask, if not more. That's the strategy that we've started to use and follow in Vermont, and it's become much more effective.
Great way to build relationships.
10 years in the legislature, I had very few people ever thank my member or me. It was always, you get it done, and then they would already be knocking on the door with another thing they wanted before before you even got to tell them that it was done. So I think that's a great point, Jeremy. I love it. And a lot of these are getting towards the finish line, which is also the exciting part. There's movement on them. We have a real chance here, and it's this kind of stuff that we do that really can push it over the edge. In New York, a lot of times there were bills at the end of session. People would look back and say, how come you didn't do this one? It seemed like a no-brainer, and we'd look into it and we'd say, well, no one asked, right? It was there, but no one came and knocked on the door and said, hey, I support this for this reason, right? And it just gets looked over. There's a lot of stuff out there, and if someone doesn't say it, then it just doesn't happen. I think that's it, unless anyone has more questions or comments. I took notes on all of the questions. I'll share it with Pat, and we'll get you out answers to anything that we didn't have a clear answer on. And I want to thank everyone for attending. I also wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsors. hold on. I had
One
this
more
ready
point
and then I pivoted to
while you're
policy.
doing that. While you're doing that, Francis, I think that the Drive Safe Integrity Act allows us to strongly consider an applicant that is not 21, whereas now we may use that as it's kind of a stumbling block for us. Because I know that we've hired at RK Miles, we've hired at least 2 or 3 employees that have been under 21, but still have their CDL. They just can't leave the state. But I think if there's a way to promote this provision, it kind of ties into workforce development in a indirect or direct way. It allows companies like ours to invest in the youth of our states collectively, giving them the opportunity to start a career with us that will hopefully be a long-term career.
That's great. And this is the kind of conversation like I really want to have in these, like, what is it? Because that's what the legislators want to hear. Like the stuff that Eric brought up too, like, what does it mean in the real world? Like, we support this, but also this is what we're experiencing. And it'd be great if you did this too, right?
Yeah.
A lot of really great stuff happens from people just bringing it up, right? It helps, it's not out of the normal. It's not bad etiquette, and you should do it. And with
I'm sorry.
Nope, keep
before
going.
we
Go
go.
ahead, Eric.
This is less the issues. This is part 2 of our briefings, but I have a meeting tomorrow that says part 2 for the briefings, and I didn't see a part 1. Did I miss something?
We
Part
did have
2
a
was
part
the
1
Q&A.
in mid-April. Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
it wasn't on the policy. It was just on what Advocacy Day is. This
Okay.
is the policy one now.
Okay, can somebody send me that? So
And
I
if
can
you'd like, yeah, we can
recording
share
of
it with you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Chris, you have a question?
Well, I don't know if this is more of a question, if not a general understanding with this. Part of with the trucking issue that I see, not more on the employment issue, but there's been a proliferation of additional states adding additional layers of highway use tax on top of existing fuel taxes. Connecticut just recently started, and we unfortunately got a permit for them, even though we rarely drive in the Connecticut. It's an additional cost layer on top of supply chain for the 7 states that do it. I think it's 7 states, New York being one of them. And because I see it with some of my duties, we're paying $3,000 a month in additional road taxes for our vehicles, and it changes by the weight of the vehicle. So I don't know if that's something that we can have addressed on the federal level. I know on the federal level, they're leaning more towards a mile-based tax system as opposed to fuel taxes, but it is becoming an increasing cost layer for delivery vehicles. And because, like I said, I see the Connecticut adding it, maybe that's something we can address at some point.
What do you think, Pat? Is that more of we take it to the state and local level or federal across the board? What's the?
We'd have to do some discovery there. I just don't have a good answer for you off the top.
Yeah, I figured I'd bring it up. Like
All right,
I said,
we'll take it down. We'll look at it. It's a good point.
Yeah, I love that New York State heavy use tax. I love paying that.
Don't even get me started. Like I said, it's just an additional cost that may or may not necessarily be necessary on top of, taxation we already pay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, if you're gonna roll into any of this federal taxes on equipment, you gotta look at that 12% excise tax as well on anything new, which is one of the reasons why they definitely should give you depreciation. But anyway, I agree, if at some point you guys want to take up that fuel tax, that is an issue. Interstate, federal, 2290s, they're all pretty high.
All right, I want to thank everyone for joining us, and Nicolina is going to put up our sponsors, which have been very generous in helping to make this day possible. And I want to thank everyone for joining us again. And we're going to have another one tomorrow. It is going to be mostly a repeat, but the conversation may differ if you want to join in. And anyone who hasn't managed to get a hold of the first one, we'd be happy to share it with you.
Nicolina put it in the link, actually.
Oh, excellent. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Everyone have a good day.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
Thank
you.
Looking
Bye.
forward to
you.
seeing you in person.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.